You've been lied to about paratroopers. You've been told they're the elite, the tip of the spear, the warriors who jump from perfectly good aircraft into hell itself. The 101st Airborne, the 173rd Airborne, the Screaming Eagles, Sky Soldiers, the best of the best. Wrong, because in the jungles of Vietnam, those legendary American paratroopers ran into something that made them look like loud, clumsy amateurs. Something that walked everywhere, something that refused to use helicopters, something that moved through the green hell so quietly the enemy called them ghosts. Australian Infantry. Not special forces, not commandos, not the SASS, just ordinary infantry battalions. The Royal Australian Regiment. Kids from sheep stations and factory floors who signed up thinking they'd get a tan and maybe see some action. They got both, but what they became in those jungles would make America's most elite units rewrite their entire tactical doctrine. Here's what history won't tell you. From 1965 to 1972, Australian infantry battalions operating in Phuoc Tuy province achieved kill ratios that made the Pentagon's analysts think there was a clerical error. 15-1, sometimes 20-1. On exceptional operations, 50-1. These weren't one-off ambushes. This was standard operating procedure. The American paratroopers? 3-1 on a good day. That's not opinion. That's arithmetic you can verify in the official records. The ones buried deep in the archives because they embarrassed the brass. The 173rd Airborne Brigade arrived in Vietnam in May 1965. First major American ground combat unit in country. Elite paratroopers. Highly trained, motivated. They brought shock and awe. They brought firepower. They brought helicopters and artillery, and the full weight of American military doctrine. They got shredded. By December 1965, the 173rd had taken casualties that made commanders question whether the conventional American approach was working. Operation Hump. Operation Marauder. Firefights where the Viet Cong melted away before the artillery could even register targets. Where American patrols walked into ambushes they never saw coming, where the jungle itself seemed to be the enemy. Then the Australians arrived. 1st Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment. 1 Ra, May 1965. 800 men, no fanfare, no press coverage. Just infantrymen who trained in the swamps of Queensland and the scrub of the Northern Territory. They set up in Bien Hoa, started running patrols. The Americans watched with amusement. The Australians didn't use helicopters for insertion. They walked everywhere. 5-day patrols, 7-day patrols, sometimes 10 days on foot in 100-degree heat. The American paratrooper doctrine was speed and violence, helicopter insertion. Make contact, call in artillery and air support, extract, do it again tomorrow. The jungle was just terrain to be crossed as quickly as possible. The Australian doctrine was the opposite. The jungle wasn't terrain, it was home. You lived in it. You became part of it. You moved through it so quietly that you could walk within meters of the enemy and they'd never know you were there. We thought they were crazy, Lieutenant Colonel John Hayes, 173rd Airborne, later admitted, walking everywhere in that heat. No helicopter support. Living in the jungle for a week at a time, it looked like suicide. By September 1965, the casualty reports told a different story. 1 Rare had made contact with Viet Cong forces 47 times, confirmed enemy KIA, 178. Australian casualties, 4 wounded, 0 killed. The Americans were reading these reports and checking them twice. The numbers didn't make sense. Elite paratroopers were taking 15% casualties per month. Australian infantry were operating at near-perfect efficiency. Something was very wrong with America's understanding of jungle warfare. Or something was very right about Australia's. In November 1965, the Pentagon sent observers to study Australian operations. What they documented would eventually force the entire American tactical approach to be reconsidered. But the lessons came hard. Because American military culture, especially paratrooper culture, doesn't like being told that guys who walk everywhere are better than guys who jump out of planes. The friction started in December 1965. Joint operations between 1 Ra and elements of the 173rd Airborne, Phuoc Tuy province. Dense jungle, known VC stronghold. The plan, Australian infantry would lead long-range reconnaissance patrols. American paratroopers would provide quick reaction force and fire support. On paper, it made sense. In practice, it was a collision between two completely different military philosophies. First patrol out. Mixed Australian-American composition, 12 Australians, 8 Americans, 5-day patrol into VC-controlled territory. The Americans brought standard combat load, ammunition, grenades, rations, radio, total weight about 60 pounds. Noisy, metal on metal, gear that clinked and rattled. The Australians looked at them like they'd shown up in clown suits. An Australian private from the Blue Mountains, sheep shearer named Tommy Wright, pulled aside an American corporal. "Mate, you can't patrol in that." The American corporal, paratrooper qualified, 2 tours in Germany, decorated, looked down at Wright. "This is standard airborne load." Wright shook his head. "Not in this jungle, it's not." The Australians taped everything. Every metal surface wrapped in cloth or rubber. Grenades secured so they couldn't shift. Ammunition distributed to eliminate rattling. Packs adjusted so nothing moved. The noise difference was immediate and striking. The Americans sounded like a hardware store falling downstairs. The Australians sounded like nothing at all. But sound was just the beginning. The patrol moved out at 0600 hours. The Americans set the pace they'd learned in airborne school. Fast, aggressive, cover ground. The Australians kept stopping. The Americans kept bumping into them. After 2 hours, the Australian patrol commander, Lieutenant Peter Hines from Perth, former law student, 23 years old, called a halt. He pulled the American NCO aside. "We need to talk about pace." The American sergeant looked confused. "We're barely moving." "Exactly," Hines said. "And every VC within 500 meters knows exactly where we are." This was the first lesson, the one that would echo through every joint operation for the next 3 years. The lesson American paratroopers learned the hard way. Speed kills you in the jungle. Silence keeps you alive. The Australian patrol method was brutal in its simplicity. Move 20 meters. Stop. Listen for 3 minutes. Scan for 5. Move another 20 meters. Stop. Listen. Scan. All day. Every day. For however many days the patrol lasted. The Americans thought it was insane. You'd never cover ground. You'd never find the enemy. You'd waste time and energy. The Australians had a different view. "We're not looking for the enemy," Hines explained. "We're becoming part of the terrain. When we're ready, the enemy shows himself. Then we kill him." The American sergeant radioed back to base. "These Australians are moving at about 1 kilometer per hour. Request permission to set our own pace." The reply came from someone who'd already read the casualty reports. "Negative. You follow their procedures, observe and learn." The sergeant didn't like it. His men liked it less, but orders were orders. By day 3, things changed. The patrol was 12 kilometers from base. Dense, triple canopy jungle. The kind where sunlight doesn't reach the ground, where visibility is measured in meters, not football fields. The Australians moved with a rhythm the Americans were starting to recognize. Stop, listen, watch, move, stop, watch. At 14:20 hours, the point man froze. Australian private named Jack Morrison grew up tracking kangaroos in the Northern Territory. His hand came up. The patrol melted into the jungle. 12 Australians, 8 Americans, 20 men who suddenly became invisible. The American sergeant heard nothing, saw nothing. The jungle looked exactly like it had looked for the past 3 days. Green, dense, empty. Morrison stayed frozen for 4 minutes. Then his hand moved in a signal. Enemy, close, moving. The Americans still heard nothing. Then, maybe 40 meters ahead, a sound. Voices, Vietnamese, casual conversation. The kind of talking you do when you're not expecting contact, when you think the jungle belongs to you. Morrison hand signaled. 6 enemy, moving parallel, unaware. Hines made a decision. He signaled, let them pass. The Americans couldn't believe it. 6 VC, right there. Easy targets. The whole reason they were on patrol. And the Australians were letting them walk away. The VC patrol passed within 30 meters. never looked in the right direction, never sensed 20 enemy soldiers lying in the jungle watching them. They disappeared into the green. The Australian patrol waited. 15 minutes of absolute stillness. Then Hines signaled, "Move." That night, at the patrol base, the American sergeant finally asked, "Why didn't we take them?" Hines was cleaning his rifle. "Because 6 VC aren't worth compromising the patrol. We're here to kill the enemy. We're here to gather intelligence," Hines corrected. Those 6 were moving casually, talking. That means this area isn't a stronghold. It's a transit route. They're moving between positions, which means there's something bigger nearby. Tomorrow, we find it. The American sergeant was quiet then. "How did your point man hear them?" "We were right behind him. We heard nothing." "He didn't hear them," Hines said. "He sensed them." "Sensed them?" "Jack's from the territory. Been tracking animals since he could walk in the bush. You don't wait to hear things. You feel when something's wrong. The jungle tells you if you listen properly." This was the second lesson, the one that took American observers months to understand, the one that eventually appeared in after-action reports under different terminology, but which the Australians understood instinctively. The jungle is alive. It has a rhythm. When something disrupts that rhythm, you can feel it if you're paying attention. Bird calls, insect noise, the way leaves move, the smell of the air. Australian infantry didn't search for the enemy. They became so attuned to the jungle that the enemy's presence registered as wrongness, as disruption, as opportunity. American paratroopers were trained to dominate terrain. Australian infantry were trained to disappear into it. Day 4, the patrol found what Hines was looking for. A trail, not a big one, maybe 18 inches wide, but used regularly. Worn earth, broken vegetation, and something else. Fresh boot prints, many of them, moving northeast. Hines studied the trail for 20 minutes. Didn't touch it, didn't cross it, just observed from 10 meters back in the jungle. The American sergeant watched, learning. Finally, Hines moved the patrol back 200 meters, set up an observation post. They'd watch the trail, document enemy movement, build a picture of VC operations in this area. The Americans expected an ambush, set up a kill zone, hit them hard. The Australians had different priorities. "We don't ambush unless we know exactly what we're hitting," Hines explained. "Could be 3 VC, could be a company, could be civilians being forced to porter supplies. We watch first, understand the pattern. Then we decide whether to kill or to report." For 18 hours, the patrol observed. 7 separate groups used the trail. Small groups, 3 to 5 individuals, moving carefully but not tactically, carrying supplies, rice, ammunition boxes, medical supplies. Hines documented everything: times, numbers, direction, type of supplies, building a picture of enemy logistics. The Americans were getting antsy. Easy targets, right there. No artillery needed, no air support, just rifles and the element of surprise. But Hines didn't give the order. On the 5th morning, the patrol was 40 meters from the trail, observing. At 0635 hours, Morrison signaled again. Enemy. Different direction. Closer. This time the Americans heard it too. Movement. Multiple individuals. Coming toward the patrol position from the west. Not on the trail. Through the jungle. A VC patrol. 8 men. Moving in tactical formation. Weapons ready. Searching. They'd been compromised. Somehow, the enemy knew there was a patrol in the area. Hines made a rapid series of hand signals. The Australians moved instantly, shifted positions, created an L-shaped ambush, interlocking fields of fire. The Americans followed, trying to match the fluid silence of the Australian movement. The VC patrol moved closer, 60 meters, 50 meters. They were searching but not very effectively, moving too fast, making noise, 40 meters. Hines waited. The discipline was extraordinary. 20 men lying in the jungle, 8 enemy soldiers walking toward them. No one moving, no one breathing loud. 30 meters. The VC point man was young, maybe 19, carrying an AK-47. He looked nervous, scanning the jungle but seeing nothing. 25 meters. Hines still waited. 20 meters. The Australian discipline was absolute. Every man knew his sector. Every man knew the signal. Every man trusted the commander. 15 meters. Hines fired first. Single shot. The point man dropped. Then, the jungle exploded. Australian SLRs controlled fire, each man selecting targets. The L-shaped ambush meant the enemy walked into a crossfire they couldn't escape. It lasted 8 seconds. 8 VC dead. 0 Australian casualties. The Americans hadn't fired a shot. By the time they'd identified targets, the Australians had already finished the fight. Hines signaled, "Move." Now, the patrol was 500 meters away in 4 minutes. Moving fast now, silent running. The sound of the firefight would bring reinforcements. The trail they'd been watching would flood with VC investigating the contact. They moved for 2 hours. Then, Hines called a halt. Set up a defensive position. Waited. Nothing. No pursuit. No follow-up. The jungle was quiet. That night, the American sergeant asked the question that Pentagon observers would be asking for the next 2 years. How did you know to wait until 15 meters? Hines was matter-of-fact. Inside 20 meters, the ambush is guaranteed. Beyond 20, they might have time to react. We wait until we can't miss. But they were compromised. How did you stay so calm? They were searching, Hines said. But they weren't certain. If we'd opened fire at 50 meters, we might have missed some. They'd have gone to ground, called for help, turned into a running firefight. This way, clean kill, rapid extraction, no follow-up contact. The American sergeant was silent. Then, "This is nothing like what we're taught." "I know," Hines said. The patrol extracted the next day, walked back to base. 15 kilometers. No helicopter. Just boot leather and patience. The after-action report documented what happened, but it couldn't document what the Americans had learned. That couldn't be written in official language. It could only be understood by living it. The Australians didn't fight in the jungle. They lived in the jungle and killed from it. Back at Bien Hoa, the American observers compiled their findings. What they documented would eventually circulate through special forces, through MACV, through the Pentagon itself. But in December 1965, it was just a growing recognition that the Australians had figured something out that elite American units had missed. The 173rd Airborne requested more joint operations, not for Australian support, for Australian training. This is where the story gets interesting, because what happened next exposed a problem with American military culture that nobody wanted to admit. The paratroopers were elite, the absolute tip of the spear. Trained at Fort Benning, airborne qualified, the best soldiers America produced. And they needed to be taught jungle warfare by Australian infantrymen who'd never jumped from a plane in their lives. The ego hit was substantial. In January 1966, 5 RA arrived in Vietnam, fresh battalion, 800 men. They established base at Nui Dat in Phuoc Tuy province. The American command structure watched carefully. More Australian battalions meant more opportunities to study their methods, or more opportunities to prove that the 1 RA success was a fluke. The 173rd Airborne was operating in the same province. Joint operations increased, and the friction increased with them. American paratroopers are trained on speed and aggression. The doctrine is sound. When you jump into hostile territory, you need to establish security fast, seize objectives, dominate the enemy before they can react. This works in conventional warfare. It works in Europe. It even works in open terrain, in triple canopy jungle against an enemy who lives there. It's suicide. But try telling that to men who've earned their jump wings. Try telling that to sergeants who've done 3 tours and made it home alive. Try telling that to officers who've built their careers on airborne doctrine. The Australians tried anyway. February 1966, joint patrol. 2 Australian sections, 1 American airborne squad, 7-day patrol into War Zone D, VC stronghold, dense jungle, no landing zones for helicopter extraction. If something went wrong, you walked out or you died. The American squad leader was Sergeant Mike Brennan, Irish kid from Boston. 3 years in the 173rd, 2 Bronze Stars, combat veteran. He'd seen things that would give civilians nightmares. He knew his business, but he'd never operated with Australians before. The patrol assembled at 050 hours. The Australians were ready. Gear taped, weapons cleaned. Faces already painted in camouflage. They looked professional, quiet, unremarkable. Brennan's squad arrived 15 minutes late. Gear rattling, talking, energy drinks and cigarettes, ready to go. The Australian patrol commander was Sergeant David Collins, from Brisbane, former electrician, 25 years old. He looked at Brennan's squad and his expression didn't change. Right. First thing, noise discipline. Brennan grinned. We're good, Sarge. Collins didn't grin back. You're loud. Fix it or stay here. The American squad thought it was a joke. Australians were supposed to be laid back, easygoing. This guy was dead serious. We're airborne, one of Brennan's men said. We've done this before. Not with us you haven't, Collins said. In this jungle, noise kills you. So tape your gear, secure anything that moves. And when we're moving, you don't talk. You don't whisper, you signal. Clear? Brennan's squad exchanged looks, but Collins wasn't negotiating. Either they followed Australian procedures, or they didn't go. It took 40 minutes to retape gear, to adjust loads, to eliminate every source of noise. The Australians helped, showed them techniques, wrapping methods, load distribution. When they were done, Brennan's squad was quieter, not Australian quiet, but better. Good enough, Collins said. Now, movement. We move at 1 kilometer per hour. We stop every 20 meters. We listen for 3 minutes minimum. Anyone breaks this rhythm, the whole patrol stops. One of Brennan's men couldn't help himself. 1 kilometer per hour, we'll never get anywhere. Collins looked at him. We'll get exactly where we need to be, and we'll get there alive. Your way, you cover ground fast and walk into an ambush you never saw coming. Our way, we see the ambush before it sees us. The patrol moved out. For the first hour, the Americans struggled. The stop-start rhythm felt unnatural, inefficient. They were used to moving with purpose, covering ground, getting to the objective. But the Australians were patient. Every time the Americans got ahead, they stopped, waited, let the rhythm reassert itself. By hour 3, something changed. Brennan started to feel it. The jungle wasn't just vegetation anymore. It had depth, texture, sound. The Australian method, stop, listen, watch, let you process all of it. The constant movement of American patrols meant you were always pushing through the jungle. You never became part of it. This was different. At 1100 hours, the point man stopped. Australian corporal named Ray Hughes, timber worker from Tasmania. His hand came up. The patrol froze. Brennan heard nothing, but he'd learned. If the Australians stopped, there was a reason. Hughes stood motionless for 7 minutes. Then he signaled. Enemy. Ahead. Many. Collins moved forward, took position next to Hughes. Observed. Then he moved back to Brennan. VC base camp. Maybe 40 meters ahead. At least 20 enemy, possibly more. Brennan's instinct was immediate. We should call it in. Artillery strike. Collins shook his head. We observe first. Get accurate numbers. Map the position. Then we call. They could move before we get support here. They could, Collins agreed. But if we call in artillery now, we're guessing. Could be 20 VC. Could be 200. Could be a field hospital with wounded. We watch first. Then we decide. For 6 hours, the patrol observed. Rotating positions. Documenting everything. Enemy strength. Weapon types. Fortification. Supply dumps. Movement patterns. The Americans learned their third lesson. Patience isn't weakness. It's the deadliest weapon in the jungle. By 1700 hours, Collins had what he needed. Confirmed 23 enemy. Base camp. Supply cache. No heavy weapons. No fortifications. They're using this as a rest area between operations. He radioed the information back to base. We can hit this ourselves, he said. Or we can call in artillery and destroy the supplies. The decision came back, hit them. Collins planned the ambush, the Australian way. He positioned the patrol in an L shape, interlocking fields of fire, claymores at key points, escape routes covered. Then he waited for the right moment. At 19:20 hours, as light was failing, the VC gathered for evening meal. 23 men in a loose group, relaxed, talking, cooking rice over small fires. Collins initiated the ambush. The claymores went first, then rifles, controlled fire. Each man had a sector. Each man knew his target. It lasted 11 seconds. 23 VC dead. The supply cache destroyed with thermite grenades. The patrol was moving away before the smoke cleared. Brennan's squad had participated, but they'd watched the Australians work. The speed wasn't in the movement. It was in the execution. The Australians had taken 6 hours to set up an 11-second ambush, and it was perfect. No wounded enemy to slow them down. No Australian casualties. No chance of counterattack. American doctrine was speed and firepower. Australian doctrine was patience and precision. That night, at a patrol base 2 kilometers away, Brennan asked Collins the question, "How do you stay patient that long?" Collins was eating cold rations, because impatience gets you killed. Those VC thought they were safe. They'd posted no sentries. They were cooking. Relaxed. That only happens because every other patrol they've encountered came blundering through the jungle making noise. They've learned that they'll hear the enemy coming, so they don't bother with proper security. We teach them different, he continued. We teach them that the jungle itself might kill them, that there might be enemy 40 meters away, and they'll never know until it's too late. After a while, they get nervous, jumpy, start making mistakes. That's when they're most vulnerable. Brennan was quiet. Then, "This is psychological warfare. Everything's psychological warfare," Collins said. "The VC are good, really good. They know this terrain. They know how to fight. But they're human. They get tired. They get scared. They make assumptions. Our job is to exploit that." The patrol continued for 5 more days. 2 more contacts, both Australian initiated, both ended in under 15 seconds. Both resulted in complete enemy casualties with no Australian losses. When the patrol returned to base, Brennan filed a report. It's still in the archives, buried deep, because it said things the army didn't want to hear. Australian infantry operate with a level of patience and tactical discipline that exceeds anything I've observed in conventional forces. Their kill-to-casualty ratio isn't luck, it's methodology. They've adapted to jungle warfare in ways that make standard American tactics look amateurish. That last word, amateurish, coming from a decorated airborne sergeant, that got attention. More American units requested Australian integration, not as allies, as teachers. In March 1966, the Australian Task Force was formally established at Nui-Dat, 5 RAR and 6 RA. Later, joined by other battalions on rotation, the Americans watched closely because something remarkable was happening. The Australians were operating in some of the most hostile terrain in Vietnam, Phuoc Thu Province, VC and NVA strongholds, jungles so dense that aerial reconnaissance was nearly useless, and they were achieving results that made the statisticians think there were errors in the reports. Monthly kill ratios for Australian battalions, 15-1 on average. Some months as high as 30-1. American infantry units, 3-1 on average. American airborne units, 4-1 on average. Same enemy, same terrain, different methods, dramatically different outcomes. The Pentagon sent investigation teams. They wanted to understand if the Australians were just lucky, if they were operating in easier areas, if they were inflating their kill counts. What they found was uncomfortable. The Australians were operating in harder areas. Their kill counts were conservative, if anything, underreported, and their methods were so fundamentally different from American doctrine that implementing them would require retraining entire divisions. The problem wasn't tactical, it was cultural. American military culture rewards aggression, speed, decisive action. These are virtues. These win conventional wars. Officers who call in artillery and secure objectives quickly get promoted. Officers who spend 6 hours observing before acting look indecisive. Australian military culture rewards patience, precision, economy of force. These win guerrilla wars, but they look slow, inefficient. To American observers, Australian operations often looked like nothing was happening. Days of patrolling with no contact, hours of observation before action. Then the casualty reports came in, and the numbers told a different story. The 173rd Airborne Brigade operated in 3 Corps from 1965 to 1971, 1,606 killed in action, approximately 8,000 wounded. They conducted 192 major operations. They inflicted estimated 12,000 enemy casualties. The Australian Task Force operated in Phuoc Tu Province from 1966 to 1971, 521 killed in action, approximately 3,000 wounded. They inflicted estimated 15,000 enemy casualties. The Australians had 1/3 the casualties while inflicting similar or higher enemy losses, with significantly fewer troops. Peak Australian strength in Vietnam was about 8,000. The 173rd alone was nearly 4,000 men, and that doesn't count the massive American force elsewhere in 3 Corps. The mathematics was brutal. The Australians were 3 times more efficient at killing the enemy while keeping their own soldiers alive. This created a problem. Because if Australian methods were that much better, what did that say about American doctrine? What did that say about the training at Fort Benning? What did that say about the elite airborne divisions? The answer was uncomfortable, so it was buried. Lessons were learned quietly. Doctrine was adjusted slowly, but the fundamental truth was never officially acknowledged. Australian infantry, regular infantry, not special forces, had developed jungle warfare techniques superior to anything the Americans had. And they'd done it by rejecting almost everything American military culture valued. Let's talk about what made Australian infantry different, not just tactically, but philosophically, because the tactics alone don't explain the success. The underlying approach does. American doctrine in Vietnam was built on firepower and mobility. The helicopter changed everything. You could insert troops anywhere, extract them under fire, bring in supplies daily, medevac casualties within minutes. The jungle wasn't an obstacle anymore, it was just terrain to be crossed between objectives. This created a specific mindset. The jungle was the enemy's environment, but you didn't need to master it. You needed to dominate it. Bring so much firepower that the enemy couldn't survive, move so fast he couldn't react, use technology to overcome his home field advantage. It worked in some contexts. Search and destroy operations could clear areas temporarily. Helicopters saved thousands of lives through rapid medevac. Artillery could break up enemy concentrations, but it also created vulnerabilities. American patrols were loud because they knew helicopter extraction was available. They moved fast because they weren't trying to live in the jungle, just move through it. They relied on firepower because they could call in support within minutes. The VC learned these patterns. They learned that American patrols made noise, that they moved quickly, that they called in artillery at first contact. So the VC adapted. They set ambushes near American patrol routes. They engaged briefly, then dispersed before artillery arrived. They avoided areas where Americans could bring their firepower to bear. The result was a war where Americans controlled the day, but not the night, where casualties were high and kills were uncertain, where the enemy seemed to fade away whenever you tried to bring decisive force against them. Australian doctrine was built on different assumptions. The jungle wasn't the enemy, it was home. You lived there, you became part of it. You didn't need helicopter support because you carried everything you needed. You didn't need artillery because you got so close that rifles were enough. This created a different mindset. The Australian soldier wasn't visiting the jungle. He was a permanent resident. He knew every sound, every smell, every pattern. He could tell the difference between rain on leaves and boots on a trail. He could sense enemy presence before he saw it. This sounds mystical. It's not. It's just immersion. When you spend 7 days straight in the jungle, you start to understand it. The first day, it's just green hell. By day 3, you're noticing patterns. By day 5, you can feel when something's wrong. American patrols were usually 2-4, 7-2 hours. in and out. Not enough time to become part of the environment. Australian patrols were 5-10 days minimum, sometimes longer. Enough time to stop being a visitor and start being part of the ecosystem. The Australian soldier in Vietnam looked different from his American counterpart. Less gear, no helmet. They wore soft hats, no flak jacket, too hot, too noisy. Basic web gear with ammunition, water, rations, everything taped and secured for silence. The weapon was the SLR, L1A1 self-loading rifle, British design, 7.62 mm, semi-automatic, heavy, reliable, accurate. Not as much firepower as the American M16, but the Australians didn't want firepower. They wanted accuracy. One shot, one kill wasn't just a motto. It was doctrine. You didn't spray and pray. You identified your target. You aimed. You fired once. Target dropped. Moved to next target. This required discipline, marksmanship, patience. The exact qualities Australian infantry training emphasized. The average Australian soldier arriving in Vietnam was 22 years old, national serviceman or regular. He'd done 6 months basic training, then 3 months advanced infantry training, then 2 months jungle warfare training in Australia's tropical north, then deployment. By the time he hit Vietnam, he'd spent nearly a year learning to be infantry. Not special forces, just infantry. But infantry done properly. The American paratrooper arrived with less total training, but more specialized qualification. Basic training, advanced infantry training, airborne school, impressive qualifications, elite status, but less time actually training for jungle warfare. The 173rd did jungle training in Okinawa. Good training, professional, but measured in weeks, not months. The difference showed in the field. Australian infantry moved through jungle like they'd grown up there, because many of them had. Kids from Queensland rainforests, Northern Territory scrub, Tasmania wilderness. They understood how to move through dense vegetation quietly, how to navigate by terrain features, how to sense when you're being watched. American paratroopers moved through jungle like soldiers, trained, professional, but foreign to the environment. This is the lesson that was hardest for American military culture to accept. That specialization, airborne qualification, elite status, advanced schools, mattered less than fundamental infantry skills properly applied. That walking everywhere was better than helicopter insertion. That patience was deadlier than speed. That silence was more powerful than firepower. These lessons contradicted everything American doctrine valued. So they were learned slowly, reluctantly, and never fully acknowledged. But they were learned. Because the body count doesn't lie. April 1966. Long Tan Rubber Plantation. 5 Ra area of operations. This is where Australian methods would be tested under the worst possible conditions, where patience and precision would face a conventional enemy assault, where walking infantry would prove they could survive what helicopter mobile forces couldn't. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, you need to understand what Australian infantry training actually looked like, because that's where the methodology came from. Canungra Jungle Training Centre, Queensland, where every Australian soldier going to Vietnam learned how to survive and kill in tropical jungle. Not a course you could fail if you showed up, a course that broke men who weren't ready. The training was 12 weeks. Sounds short. It wasn't. From 0500 to 2200 hours, 7 days a week. Physical torture combined with technical mastery. They'd march you 30 kilometers with full pack. Then spend 4 hours on camouflage techniques, then night navigation, then ambush procedures, then repeat. The instructors were veterans. Korea, Malaya, Borneo, men who'd learned jungle warfare by doing it wrong and surviving. They had no patience for theory. Everything was practical. Everything was tested under stress. Week 1, movement. How to walk quietly. Sounds simple, it's not. Walking through jungle quietly requires you to feel the ground before you put weight down, to move vegetation aside rather than pushing through it, to stop completely when you hear anything, to synchronize with the jungle's natural rhythm. They'd have you walk 100 meters. If an instructor heard you, you started over. Some soldiers did that walk 50 times before they got it right. Week 2, observation. How to see what's actually there. How to spot disturbances. How to recognize ambush sites. How to identify enemy sign. They'd set up scenarios. Enemy camps, trails, ambush positions. If you missed the indicators, you failed. If you failed too many times, you went back to week 1. Week 3, tracking. Following enemy movement through jungle. Reading broken vegetation. Crushed insects. Disturbed earth. Recent rain could wash away prints, but not all sign. They had trackers from Aboriginal units teaching. Men who could follow days-old trails through terrain that looked untouched. Week 4, survival living in jungle with minimal resupply. Water procurement. Food sources, shelter construction, medical self-care. They'd drop you in with 3 days' rations and extract you after 7. If you couldn't find water and food, you learned real quick. Weeks 5 through 8, tactics. Ambushes, counter-ambushes, patrol formations, react to contact drills, prisoner handling, casualty evacuation. Every scenario rendered under stress. Live ammunition, artillery simulators, instructors screaming and testing your reactions. Weeks 9 through 11, integration, full patrols, 5 to 7 days in the jungle. All skills combined. Realistic scenarios. Enemy played by instructors who knew every trick because they'd survived every trick. Week 12, final exercise, 10-day patrol, realistic enemy, real extraction criteria. You succeeded or you failed. There was no middle ground. The soldiers who graduated Canungra knew jungle warfare, not theoretically, practically. They'd lived it for 3 months. They'd failed and learned and failed again until they got it right. This was the foundation, the methodology that produced those casualty ratios. American jungle training was good, professional but shorter, less intense, more focused on maintaining existing units than building jungle expertise from scratch. The difference showed in Vietnam. Australian infantry arrived, ready. American infantry arrived and learned on the job. The Americans learned. They adapted. By 1968, American jungle operations had improved dramatically. Units that worked with Australians absorbed the lessons. Long-range reconnaissance patrols adopted Australian techniques. Some special forces teams trained with Australian SAS. But the learning came at a cost, measured in American casualties. Soldiers who died because their training emphasized speed over patience, firepower over precision, technology over fieldcraft. This is why the story matters. Not because Australians were better soldiers. They weren't. Americans were brave, dedicated, professional. The issue was doctrine, training, philosophy. The Australians had figured something out. That jungle warfare required different methods than conventional warfare. That elite status meant nothing if your tactics were wrong for the environment. That the best technology couldn't replace fundamental infantry skills. The American military eventually learned these lessons. But the institutional ego took years to admit that guys who walked everywhere had taught the paratroopers how to fight. By mid-1966, joint operations were routine. Australian infantry and American units working together. Not because the Americans needed backup, because they needed to learn. The most famous example, and the one American veterans still talk about, was Operation Toledo, June 1966. Phuoc 2 Province. Mixed Australian-American force. Objective: clear a known VC stronghold, multiple base camps, supply caches, possible regimental headquarters. The American component was a company from the 173rd Airborne, 120 men. The Australian component was 2 companies from 6 RA, 240 men. On paper, the Australians were support. In practice, they were running the operation. The American plan was standard: helicopter insertion, multiple landing zones, converge on the objective, bring maximum firepower, secure area, extract. The Australian commander, Major Bruce McQualter, former schoolteacher from Sydney, looked at the plan and said, "No, that won't work," he said. The American commander, Captain James Rodriguez, West Point graduate, airborne qualified, was polite but firm. "This is textbook. We've done it 100 times. "Against this enemy?" McQualter asked. Rodriguez admitted they hadn't cleared this specific area before. "Then they know the terrain better than we do," McQualter said. "Helicopter insertion tells them we're coming. They'll disperse before we land. We'll secure empty jungle. What's your alternative?" "We walk in," McQualter said. 4 days patrol. Silent approach. We find them before they know we're there. Then we hit them." Rodriguez looked at his men. Elite paratroopers, trained for rapid deployment, being told they'd spend 4 days walking through jungle in 100-degree heat, but the casualty ratios didn't lie. Australian methods worked. So Rodriguez agreed. The operation launched. June 12th. Mixed patrols. Australians in lead. Americans learning. For 3 days, they moved slowly. The Americans struggled with the pace. They were used to covering 1015 kilometers per day. The Australian pace was 4-5 kilometers. Stop, listen, observe, move. It felt like torture. But on day 3, they found what McQualter was looking for. Signs, fresh trails, recent camps, enemy movement. The Australians tightened the patrol formations, increased security, reduced noise even further. They were getting close. On day 4, at 0940 hours, the point section made contact. Visual only. VC patrol. 6 men, moving southeast. Unaware. McQualter made the call. Follow them. See where they lead. For 8 hours, the Australian and American force tracked that patrol. Stayed 200-300 meters back. Observed through binoculars when terrain allowed. Lost visual contact multiple times, but picked up the trail again through tracking. At 17:20 hours, the VC patrol walked into their base camp, and it was bigger than intelligence had suggested. Not a company, a battalion, maybe 400 VC, bunkers, trenches, supply dumps, command post. This was a major staging area. McQualter called in the information. The American command wanted immediate airstrike. McQualter vetoed it. Too many civilians in the area. We don't know if they're forced labor or willing participants. We hit this wrong. We create a propaganda disaster. So what do? We blockade it, McQualter said. Cut their supply lines, wait for them to come out, ambush them as they move, bleed them over days instead of hitting them all at once. This was Australian warfare. Patient, economic, precise. Over the next 6 days, the Australian-American force set up multiple ambush sites, every trail leading to the base camp, every water source. The VC were trapped. They could stay in the camp without water, or they could move and get hit. They moved. First ambush, June 19th, 0620 hours. 20 VC moving to water source. Australian section hit them. 15 seconds, 20 enemy dead, 0 friendly casualties. Second ambush, June 19th, 1840 hours. VC supply party, 30 men carrying rice. American platoon with Australian advisors. Controlled fire. 30 enemy dead, 2 Americans wounded. Third ambush, June 20th, 0445 hours. VC attempting to break blockade. 50 men moving in tactical formation. Mixed Australian-American position. Claymores and rifles. 43 enemy dead. 7 escaped. 1 Australian wounded. The pattern continued. Over 6 days, 17 separate ambushes. Total enemy casualties, 286 confirmed killed. Friendly casualties, 4 killed, 11 wounded. The VC battalion ceased to exist as a fighting force. They abandoned the camp, scattered into smaller groups, disappeared into the jungle. No airstrikes, no artillery, no massive firefight, just patient, methodical ambush warfare. The Australian way. The after-action reports from Operation Toledo circulated through MacV. They generated intense interest because the methodology worked, but it required patience that American command structure struggled to support. Commanders wanted results, senators wanted body count, media wanted action, Sitting in jungle for days waiting to ambush small groups didn't look impressive. It looked slow, but the mathematics were undeniable. Operation Toledo eliminated a battalion-strength enemy force at a cost of 4 friendly KIA. A conventional assault would have cost 50 times that. Captain Rodriguez filed his report. It's blunt. Australian infantry methods are fundamentally superior for this environment. Their patience, their noise discipline, their tactical precision produce results that conventional American tactics cannot match. Recommend immediate integration of Australian advisory personnel with all infantry units operating in jungle terrain. The recommendation was noted and ignored because implementing it would mean admitting that regular Australian infantry knew more about jungle warfare than elite American paratroopers. That institutional ego couldn't quite make that leap, but individual soldiers learned. Word spread. Units that worked with Australians absorbed the lessons. By late 1966, you could tell which American companies had trained with Australians. They moved differently, quieter, slower, more patient. Their casualty rates dropped. Their kill ratios improved. The lessons worked. In October 1966, the Australian task force at Nui Dat was hit with a mass assault, the Battle of Long Tan. This is the operation everyone knows, where 108 Australian soldiers held off a force estimated at 1,500, 2,000 VC and NVA, where kill ratios hit 25-1. American observers watched that battle closely because it demonstrated everything the Australians had been teaching: patience under fire, controlled fire discipline, tactical precision even while outnumbered, 15-1. The Australians didn't panic, didn't break, didn't call in artillery and run. They fought with controlled fury, made every shot count, trusted their training, held their ground. When it was over, estimated enemy casualties were 245 confirmed dead, plus hundreds more killed by artillery. Australian casualties, 18 killed, 24 wounded. American paratroopers studying the battle asked the same question: how? The answer was what they'd been learning all year: Australian training, Australian methodology. But Long Tan had another effect. It proved that Australian methods worked not just in ambush situations, but in conventional battle. That patient soldiers could be aggressive when needed, that walking everywhere didn't make you weak, it made you harder. The Australian infantryman at Long Tan had been in jungle for days before the battle, soaked, tired, operating on limited sleep. But his fitness was extraordinary because he'd walked everywhere. His legs were iron. His endurance was beyond what helicopter mobile troops maintained. The American paratroopers at Long Tan, part of the relief force, arrived by helicopter, fresh, well-rested, but when they had to pursue fleeing enemy on foot, they couldn't maintain the pace. The Australians kept going. The Americans had to stop. This was another lesson. Helicopter mobility came with a cost. Soldiers who always flew never built the endurance for sustained ground operations. Australian infantry walked everywhere, so when they needed to move 20 kilometers in 4 hours, they could. By early 1967, Australian training methods were being studied formally. The US Army sent observers to Canungra. They documented the training, took notes, recommended implementation. Some of it was adopted. Long-range reconnaissance patrol training improved. Special Forces jungle courses lengthened. Some units started emphasizing noise discipline, but the fundamental culture didn't change. Because changing culture requires admitting previous doctrine was wrong. That's hard for any military, especially one as successful as the American military. So the lessons were learned individually, soldier to soldier, unit to unit. The official records stayed silent about Australian superiority, but the soldiers knew. There's a phrase that emerged among American veterans who served with Australians. They'd be back in the States, talking about Vietnam. Someone would mention elite units, SEALs, Green Berets, Rangers, and these veterans would shake their heads. "I saw the real deal," they'd say. Aussie infantry, those guys were ghosts. Not special forces, not commandos, just infantry. But infantry who'd mastered their craft to a level that made elite units look ordinary. The rivalry between paratroopers and Australian infantry had an edge throughout 1966-67. Not hostile, but competitive. The Americans had jump wings and elite status. The Australians had better kill ratios. Both sides knew it. There are stories, probably half apocryphal, half true, of Australians and Americans meeting in bars. The American would mention he was airborne. The Australian would ask how that helped in jungle. The American would mention his kill count. The Australian would mention his kill ratio. The conversation would get tense. Sometimes it ended in brawls. More often, it ended in mutual respect. Because the Americans weren't stupid, they could read casualty reports. They could see that Australian infantry operated with a level of effectiveness that elite American units struggled to match. And the Australians weren't arrogant. They respected American courage, American firepower, American willingness to close with the enemy. They just thought the methods could be better. One story captures it. Probably true. December 1966, bar in Vung Tau. Australian corporal and American airborne sergeant, both decorated, both combat veterans. The American mentioned his Bronze Star. The Australian mentioned his patrol statistics. 64 days in jungle, 23 contacts, 47 confirmed enemy kills, 0 friendly casualties. The American did the math. That's a 2-to-1 kill ratio per patrol member. The Australian corrected. 8-man patrol, total kills 47, total patrol members 8. That's 6 kills per man. The American was quiet. Then, how? We walk, the Australian said. You fly. We live in the jungle. You visit it. We become part of it. You fight through it. Different methods, different results. You calling us amateurs? The Australian considered. No. You're brave, professional, well-trained, but you're training for the wrong war. You're training for Europe, for conventional combat. For the war you expect, we trained for the war we got. The American couldn't argue. The numbers proved it. By mid-1967, the relationship had shifted. American units weren't requesting Australian integration for support anymore. They were requesting it for training, explicitly. Send us Australian advisors. We need to learn their methods. The Australian task force couldn't spare the men. They were running their own operations, fighting their own war. But they tried to help when possible. Australian NCOs would attach to American units, teach patrol techniques, movement methods, ambush tactics. The Americans who learned from those NCOs remember them. The Aussie sergeants saved our lives, one American veteran said. They taught us how to survive, how to move quietly, how to be patient, how to kill efficiently. Everything that stateside training missed. This is the quiet story of Vietnam, the one that doesn't fit the standard narrative. That Australian infantry, not special forces, just infantry, were teaching American elite units how to fight. By 1968, American jungle tactics had evolved significantly. Long-range reconnaissance patrols used Australian methods. Some infantry companies adopted modified patrol techniques. Noise discipline improved across the board. The casualty rates reflected the change. American units operating with Australian-influenced tactics took fewer casualties, achieved better kill ratios, survived longer. But the institutional acknowledgement never came. No official doctrine change. No formal recognition that Australian methods were superior. Just quiet adaptation, lessons learned and implemented without admitting the source. The Australian task force operated in Vietnam until 1972. 7 years. Rotational battalions, different men, same methods, same results. Final statistics for Australian forces in Vietnam: 521 killed in action, 3,129 wounded. Estimated enemy casualties inflicted: 15,000,000. Total Australian force peaked at 8,000 personnel. That includes support, logistics, administration. Combat troops were maybe 3,000 at peak. The Americans had over 500,000 personnel at peak. Combat troops maybe 80,000. Total American casualties: 58,000 killed, 304,000 wounded. Total estimated enemy casualties: 1.1 million. The ratio tells the story. Australians achieved roughly 3040 enemy kills per friendly death. Americans achieved roughly 20 enemy kills per friendly death. Both forces fought the same enemy, in the same terrain, under the same conditions. The difference was methodology. The Australian advantage wasn't technology. They used mostly the same weapons as Americans. Wasn't numbers, they were massively outnumbered. Wasn't support, they had less artillery, fewer helicopters, smaller logistical tail. The advantage was training, doctrine, patience, the willingness to walk everywhere, to live in the jungle, to become part of it, to let the enemy show himself instead of charging in looking for him. Simple methodology, proven results. After Vietnam, the lessons faded. The American military moved on, focused on Cold War scenarios, mechanized warfare, European theater. Jungle warfare became a specialty, something for special forces, not something every infantryman needed. The Australians kept the institutional knowledge, kept training at Canungra, kept emphasizing fieldcraft and patience. When they deployed to East Timor, to Afghanistan, to peacekeeping operations, those lessons came with them. The soldiers who learned from Australians in Vietnam carried those lessons forward. Some became instructors, some wrote doctrine, some just taught younger soldiers what they'd learned. But the official record stayed quiet. No Pentagon study titled "How Australian Infantry Beat American Elite Units." No formal doctrine change admitting that walking was better than flying. No institutional acknowledgement that regular infantry, properly trained, could outperform specialized units. The truth lives in the casualty reports, in the after-action reviews, in the memories of soldiers who served with Australians and saw the difference. There's a memorial at Nui Dat now. Vietnamese government approved it. Lists the names of Australian soldiers who died in Phuoc Thu province. 521 names. Each one representing someone who walked into jungle, knowing the odds, who trusted the training, who did the job. The VC veterans who fought Australian forces remember them differently than they remember American forces. The Americans were the helicopter soldiers, loud, powerful, dangerous when they brought their firepower, but predictable. The Australians were the ghosts, quiet, patient, terrifying because you never knew they were there until they killed you. VC memoirs describe Australian patrols as psychological warfare, the knowledge that silent enemy soldiers might be within meters, watching, waiting. That fear changed behavior, made soldiers nervous, created mistakes. This is the victory that doesn't show in body count. The enemy you make too afraid to operate effectively is an enemy you've defeated even without pulling a trigger. American paratroopers learned this lesson the hard way by serving alongside Australian infantry, by watching their methods, by seeing the results, by gradually, reluctantly, admitting that elite status meant nothing if your tactics were wrong for the environment. We walk, you die. That wasn't just an Australian motto, it was a promise. Walk into our jungle, move like you're in training, make noise like you're safe. We'll be waiting, you'll never see us coming, and you'll die before you hear the shot. The Americans who learned this lesson survived. The ones who didn't. By 1969, American infantry tactics in Vietnam had evolved to incorporate much of what Australians had been teaching since 1965, not officially, not in doctrine manuals, but in practice. Units that survived learned. Units that didn't taught the lesson to their replacements. The 173rd Airborne Brigade, the same unit that thought Australians were crazy for walking everywhere in 1965, was running 7-day patrols by 1969, moving quietly, stopping to listen, becoming part of the jungle instead of fighting through it. Their casualty rates improved. Their effectiveness increased. They'd learned, but they'd learned at a cost. Hundreds of American soldiers died between 1965 and 1969, learning lessons that Australian infantry already knew. That walking was survival, that patience was deadlier than speed, that the jungle would teach you if you listened, or kill you if you didn't. This is the story that history won't tell you, that America's most elite ground combat troops, the paratroopers, the sky soldiers, the men who jumped into hell, needed to be taught jungle warfare by Australian infantrymen who'd never jumped from a plane in their lives. That elite status, earned through airborne qualification, meant nothing in triple canopy jungle against an enemy who lived there. That all the technology and firepower in the world couldn't replace fundamental infantry skills properly applied. That sometimes the best soldiers are the ones who walk. The legacy lives on in unexpected places. Modern American infantry training emphasizes noise discipline. Patrol techniques include Australian influence methods. Long-range reconnaissance units study Australian patrol patterns. None of this is attributed to Australians officially, but the soldiers know. The institutional knowledge passed down through generations. The old sergeants who trained with Australians in Vietnam, who learned the hard way, who made sure the next generation didn't have to learn the same lessons in blood. The Australian approach to infantry warfare, patience, precision, integration with terrain, represents something fundamental about how wars are actually won. Not through overwhelming force, not through technological superiority, but through soldiers who master their environment so completely that they become the superior predator. The paratroopers learned this. They just learned it slowly, reluctantly, at a cost measured in names on a wall in Washington, D.C. In the end, the lesson is simple. Walk into the jungle like you own it. You'll die there. Walk into the jungle like you're part of it. You'll survive. The Australians understood this instinctively. The Americans had to be taught. We walk, you die, wasn't a threat. It was a description of methodology. We walk everywhere. We live in the jungle. We become part of it. And when you enter our area of operations, loud, fast, confident in your elite status, you die. Because we're patient enough to wait, quiet enough to get close, precise enough to make every shot count. That's the lesson. That's the truth. That's what the casualty reports prove, but the official history won't acknowledge. Australian infantry taught American paratroopers how to fight. The students eventually learned, but the teachers were never officially recognized because institutional ego is harder to kill than enemy soldiers. The soldiers know, though, the men who served with Australians, who watched them work, who learned from them, who survived because of them. They know that elite status is earned in combat, not training. That jump wings mean nothing if you can't move quietly through jungle. That the best soldiers aren't always the ones with the most specialized qualifications. Sometimes the best soldiers are just infantrymen who walk everywhere, who live in the jungle, who kill with patience and precision, who teach by example, who let their results speak louder than their qualifications. The Australians didn't seek recognition, didn't demand acknowledgement, didn't care about credit. They just did the job, killed the enemy, survived the jungle, came home, and along the way, they taught America's most elite soldiers how to fight a war they weren't trained for, how to survive an environment that killed the unprepared, how to be infantrymen instead of just paratroopers. That's the story. That's the truth. That's what happened in the jungles of Vietnam when Australian infantry met American paratroopers and quietly, patiently, methodically demonstrated what real elite soldiers look like. Not the ones who jump from planes, the ones who walk into hell and come out alive, every time, because they know something the elite soldiers had to learn. In the jungle, patience isn't weakness. Silence isn't cowardice. Walking isn't inferior to flying. In the jungle, the guy who walks quietly and waits for the perfect shot beats the guy who jumps from a plane and brings overwhelming firepower, every time. Proven by statistics you can verify, demonstrated by casualty ratios that speak louder than any propaganda. The Australians walked, the enemy died, the Americans learned, and history quietly forgot. But the soldiers remember. They always remember.